Cannot pee on your face! I thought you were with me to the end! I just peed in the ocean.
Everyone remembers their favorite sitcoms. The characters as our old friends, the best jokes and most iconic scenes become anchors and security blankets, a way to identify friends and bond with them. There's a lot to love about situation comedies, and amidst the years of content and sprawling plots, some fascinating details get missed.
I feel like they're not grateful. You know, I gave them water, the sun.
Brooklyn Nine-Nine's best couple? Easy. Gina and Jake. They've got everything a couple could want, with a wholesome childhood friendship to back it all up. But you know what's the most wholesome part of this whole equation? Just like Gina and Jake, Chelsey Peretta and Andy Samberg, the actors who play the police pair, are actual childhood friends. Even better, apparently Chelsey had a bit of a crush on the former Lonely Island turned SNL cast member, but opted for doing that awkward thing where you call your crush's house. And knowing this has warped me back to an early part of high school I'd hoped to have had locked away. Dateline. Future soft boy dream hunk John Krasinski approaches an audition room only to stop and say a few brief words to a member of the on-site team. He's there to audition for the US version of The Office, Ricky Gervais's equal parts awkward, arresting, and endearing sitcom. Krasinski says he's worried this new version is going to sully the reputation of the British original. He turns out to be very wrong. What's interesting about an actor bad-mouthing a potential project at the audition? Well, it turns out that the random member of the team Krasinski confided in was actually the executive producer, Greg Daniels. But they had a good laugh about that a few years later. In fact, early impressions of the cast about the US adaptation of The Office were so bleak that Oscar Nunez, who played Oscar Martinez, refused to believe that the show would make it past the pilot stage, and as a result, refused to quit his day job in the lead-up to production. This is one of those choices that sounds wild in retrospect because we all know how big a success the Carell-led cast would go on to be, but if you think about it from Nunez's position, it makes perfect sense. Acting is a tough gig, and no job in it, even series regular, is a sure thing until at least the first season is definitely greenlit. So it's more likely that Nunez was being fiscally responsible rather than personally pessimistic. In the heady days during the peak of The Office's popularity, NBC developed a spin-off project called The Farm. Yeah, The Farm, as in Dwight's family farm. The show was intended to center around Dwight, which was both a pretty bold choice and probably also why the studio ultimately passed on the project. Dwight is an amazing character in a cast, but would get pretty grinding as the lead character. Amy Poehler acted behind the scenes to lobby for the time jump added between the penultimate and final seasons of Parks and Rec. Why? Well, Amy had her arms full with her own 2 recent children and was nonplussed about working with all the babies required to shoot the final season if it had followed in immediate chronological sequence. Not only did that choice turn out to be an incredible one for ending the show, I imagine it also earned Leslie Knope & Co. some slightly more restful moments in between takes. Imagine trying to remember your lines beside a crying baby. Jim Parsons, known far and wide for his wild yet relatable portrayal of brainiac physicist Sheldon Cooper on The Big Bang Theory, once told an interviewer about one of his strangest auditions. Apparently, the not-yet star was brought in to try out for another leading role in a sitcom, the suit-clad hound dog, Barney Stinson. Now, Stinson would end up being played by the one and only Neil Patrick Harris, but imagine for a moment, if you would, a world where their roles were somehow swapped, with Parsons playing the pickup artist and Harris the neurotic, awkward genius. It's a tough mental swap, but honestly, I think they would have both done shockingly great jobs if put in the other's shoes. On the 8th day, the Carlton Dance was created, and it was good. Actually, Alfonso Ribeiro, the actor who played Carlton on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, has gone on record saying that he based the Carlton Dance on the hilarious white man dance from Eddie Murphy's triumphant stand-up special Delirious, merged with inspiration from Courtney Cox's dance moves in Bruce Springsteen's music video for Dancing in the Dark. It's amazing, and I think more than a little humbling, to know that such a simple pair of influences could go on to shape one of the sterling contributions of not just Fresh Prince, but all sitcoms ever to the broader cultural canon. Look at those moves. Zooey Deschanel almost made the most defensible mistake of her career when she nearly passed on the script for New Girl because of its horrible working title. Now, this here's a family channel, so I want to be clear that this next phrase only refers to baby birds and former president and iconic crook Richard Nixon, but the original title of New Girl was Chicks and Dicks. Good thing she didn't pass, though, and even better that they changed the name, because New Girl turned out to be one of the best shows in a long while.
Would you rather be covered in fish scales or feathers?
Veteran actor, apocalypse survivor, Independence Day celebrator, trigger-happy supervillain, and pursuer of happiness Will Smith won't watch early episodes of his breakout role in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air because they embarrass him. Apparently, the actor was so nervous to do well and eager not to mess up that he ended up learning not just his own lines, but also the lines of every other character. On its own, that just sounds like professionalism, but according to the actor, he can also be seen actually mouthing his co-star's lines in the background of some early scenes. Smith might find this fact agonizing, but I'm pretty sure I speak for most of us when I say, that's just really endearing, Will. Frasier, a show that people like to watch to claim that they're watching smart comedy without needing to actually laugh at a joke, contained one of the best on-screen pups in TV history with Moose. Moose was so popular, in fact, that his character received more fan mail than any of the others on the show. But that's not why he makes our list. Moose makes the list because there were many scenes in which the script insisted the dog was to lick another character's ears. How'd the studio manage that? Easy peasy. Pate, yes, fancy Pate, was dabbed behind the ears of the cast to entice Moose to engage in the required tasting. Because, of course, Frasier's dog eats pate. In order to play space cadet musician and smelly cat enthusiast Phoebe Buffay on Friends, actress Lisa Kudrow learned to play the guitar. That's a normal enough thing to do for a role, except Kudrow is on record as saying she wished Phoebe played the bongos instead. Regardless of whether or not she said this because Lisa Kudrow thinks Phoebe Buffay is the kind of person who would play bongos, or because Lisa Kudrow is the kind of person who wants to play bongos themselves, I find myself positively enthralled by this information. Truly, a missed opportunity. When Nick Offerman auditioned for Parks and Rec, the part he came in for would have been a love interest of Anne's. Now, Anne, the nurse, best possible friend, and beautiful tropical fish, was played by Rashida Jones. He was turned down for being, quote, not handsome enough to be a believable love interest of someone as pretty as Rashida Jones, which is kind of hilarious given that Offerman himself is actually married in real life to Megan Mullally, evil librarian Tammy 2, who is hot, scary, and also one of the funniest people in Hollywood. One of the best running gags in Parks and Rec is that older family man Jerry is constantly put down at work despite just doing his best. In order to offset the metric ton of abuse hurled at Jerry Gergic, the show's creators resolved that he should have an utterly enviable home life. As a result, Jerry's wife was played by former Sports Illustrated model Christy Brinkley. Nicely done, Jer! What's really wild is that Brinkley was the show's top choice for the role, but signed on likely because of her daughter Sailor's adoration for the series. Nolan Gould, actor responsible for playing the vacuous, charming, and hilarious Luke Dunphy on Modern Family, is anything but vacuous in real life. While his character on the show is touted early on as being, quote, the dumbest in the family, Gould himself is a member of Mensa and graduated high school at 13 years old. Melissa Fumero's character Amy Santiago on Brooklyn Nine-Nine might be a dorky dancer, but the actress herself is a bona fide professional. In the long-running list of performers made to pretend they don't know how to do something, Fumero had to clamp down on years of professional-level training in dance, she's been dancing since she was a small child, in order to be a believable goof while playing Amy. Improv has a time-honored place in the annals of sitcom history, and among the greats, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one of the most fertile zones for on-the-fly excellence. One of the best examples of this is the 9-9 chant adopted by the characters in the series. Apparently 9-9 didn't begin as a scripted catchphrase, but was instead something just actor and professional swole man Terry Crews happened to shout a lot on set as a way to hype up the other actors. This is one of those facts that is interesting but not really surprising when you think about what working with Terry Crews was probably like after the Old Spice ads revealed that he had extreme comedic chops.
We are going to nail it! 9-9!
Yeah!
When Friends was getting ready to air, there were some concerns about Monica's likability among the producers. The concerns, by today's standards, seem a little silly, but the bigwigs were worried primarily that audience members were going to disapprove of Monica because she slept with Wine Guy on the first date. Given that a plethora of modern sitcoms begin with semi-graphic sex scenes, or at least sexual content in their opening episodes, this seems like a totally nuts thing to worry about. And even back in the morally conservative and fiscally liberal days of 1994, it was a totally nuts thing to worry about. audiences loved Monica and couldn't care less about her bedroom habits until later on when she and Chandler needed to figure out if they know that we know that they know we know. Speaking of Friends, remember that wildly uncomfortable arc where Rachel and Joey had a thing? If the nausea has returned, then the answer is yes. Turns out the prospect of Rachel and Joey as an item bugged basically the whole cast, especially Matt LeBlanc, who felt that while Joey might be a ladies' man, it was thoroughly out of character for him to do something that would so obviously hurt his best friend's feelings. Not to mention the fact that the two of them have about as much stage chemistry as two goldfish set 15 meters apart in open air. While we're on the subject of good guy Matt LeBlanc, the actor was offered and turned down the role of Phil Dunphy on Modern Family, because according to his weird Jedi acting powers, he could tell the part had been written with a particular actor in mind, and that actor wasn't Matt LeBlanc. This kind of freaky assumption turned out to be spot on. The role had been written for someone in particular, and that someone was Ty Burrell, the brilliant and hilarious actor who ended up portraying Phil marvelously. So thanks, Matt LeBlanc. Your canny acting intuition made sure the world ended up with a thoroughly perfect Phil. The West Wing is kind of a sitcom in that there's a lot of comedy and many characters spend their time sitting when they're not walking, talking, or walking, talking. But there's one scene that is pure, strange sitcom bliss, and the story of its inclusion in the show is a wild one. Early in the series, White House Press Secretary C.J. Cregg is shown lip-syncing an immaculate version of Ronnie Jordan's smoky smooth hit The Jackal, while acerbic and brilliant Toby Ziegler stands by smoking a cigar. The scene kind of comes out of nowhere in the show itself, but it was added because, according to the performers and creator Aaron Sorkin, Sorkin once walked into Allison Janae's trailer to ask her some questions, only to discover she was doing the full Jackal as a joke while Richard Schiff sat by smoking a cigar and playing the air bongos. Sorkin apparently entered, watched for a moment, said, "We're doing this," and left. In a show overstuffed with scene-stealing small roles, Jay Jackson's surreal and absurd local reporter Perd Hapley is one of the best. From his perfect newsy delivery to his bizarre use of language, Perd is the perfect level of weird to be a relatable local news anchor. It's no coincidence that Jackson plays the role so well then, because the actor himself worked as a news anchor professionally for years before landing the chance to play a literal parody of himself. In the original plan for the characters of Friends, Joey and Monica were intended to end up together. This may seem insane, but probably made sense to the showrunners before casting was complete. And this does seem to be the case, because the plan was scrapped after Courtney Cox and Matt LeBlanc were selected for the roles. What's really nuts is that this isn't as rare an occurrence as a lot of folks might think. While Hollywood decision-making can seem very behind closed doors and rigid, it's often the case that writers and showrunners will adapt their material around the particular strengths and weaknesses of the actual cast once that cast is right in front of them. Family Guy is probably one of the most contentious sitcoms ever made. For some, it ushered in a new form of comedic writing, subverting the standard character plot-driven models of traditional sitcoms by replacing it with a blank slate upon which to add any non-sequitur gag at any time via the use of a cutaway. For others, it represented not a newfangled take on a variety show, but an insult to the art of sitcom writing. Either way, though, it's undeniable that when he got the gig, Seth MacFarlane was only 24 years old, making him one of the youngest showrunners of all time. On a similar tack, Modern Family was considered for production as, get this, an animated series. But this idea was eventually scrapped in favor of a live-action cast. Probably good that the show stayed skin and bone, because if Modern Family, American Dad, and Family Guy were all running at the same time, things would have been really, really confusing. That said, the idea of an animated Sofia Vergara is a good enough idea that she should get, like, a guest role on Big Mouth or something. Back to harping on the controversy that is Family Guy's place in the sitcom canon, a few years back, South Park did a two-part episode called Cartoon Wars, which was a not at all veiled criticism of what Trey Parker and Matt Stone have outright referred to as Family Guy's lazy writing. The sort of internal beef in the comedy community would normally be, and frankly still is, pretty pointless. But it makes the list because it was revealed that the only people who hated Family Guy more than South Park were the writers for The Simpsons, who apparently reached out to the South Park showrunners to thank them for taking potshots at the Family Guy team. Well, now that that's done, I'm going back to my trailer for another stirring rendition of the Jackal. Allison Janae, eat your heart out.
9-9 style.